In my opinion, the biggest difference between a good Huntress and a great Huntress is their ability to consistently land prediction shots, to seemingly manifest hits out of thin air, to be in the survivor's head so much and to have such a good understanding of the game that they can almost land hatchets at will. Shots that will leave your opponent confused or have them brush it off as luck. Shots that in some cases will even get you accused of cheating. In this video, we're going to go over some tips and tricks to help you land more prediction hatchets in your games. Before we get started, what is a prediction shot? A prediction shot is a shot that uses information both from game sense and visual clues to help you shoot hatchets that have a non-0% chance of hitting. The key difference that makes this more skillful and less luck-based is the use of information given to you. Yes, there certainly is a luck aspect to it, but the main thing is being able to identify shots that have a much higher percent chance of hitting than most people realize. First, let's talk about basics. These are the fundamentals of predicting survivor movement and to know when and where to shoot hatchets. The flow of a game is usually pretty consistent. Survivors will work on generators if they have nothing to do. If they have a means to heal, they'll usually do so. If they're not working at a gen, they'll tend to make their way to the unhook, and for survive with friend groups, they'll tend to be more altruistic and will do anything they can to get a 4 out. All of this information can be used to help you land your shots. For example, imagine you're chasing a survivor and you have another on a hook, and suddenly a gen pops. There's a very high chance that survivor who finished the gen will start making their way towards the unhook. Now, does this mean you should go back and camp hook? Not necessarily. But you can usually have a good idea of what path that survivor is going to take to head towards the unhook. It's this type of information that can help you land more shots. If you see someone running in the distance and know generally where they're going, you can look ahead of them to identify a good place to try and intercept them with a hatchet. Aim for high traffic areas or choke points you think they'll go for, such as shack door. Survivors unaware they're being targeted are usually easier to hit. Basically, the main thing you need to do is put yourself in the survivor's shoes. What would you do if you were that survivor and at that skill level? Try and figure out what type of playstyle they have, and learn common patterns from it. Playing lots of Survivor will definitely help with this. Getting feedback on your shots is a great way to streamline the process to getting better. Try and identify what mistakes you're making and see how you can learn from them. It's a very good idea to record your games and watch them back at a different time with a clear mindset. Pay attention to things like where the hatchet lands, what pathing the survivor takes, and what other potential angles or lineups you could have used instead. Another thing I find very useful is playing against Twitch streamers. This gives you a good idea of how they're thinking based on their commentary. It gives you insight on what's going through their head and why they're making the decisions they're making. If you're struggling with game sense, I suggest trying to call out events in your games before they happen. Things like, I think this generator's about to pop, or Ace is probably going for the unhook. You'll probably be wrong a lot of the time at first, but the key thing is it gets you thinking about this sort of thing in the back of your head. As with my long-range hatchet guide, link in the description, it is very important to do things to help improve consistency. Things like fully charging your hatchets or insta-releasing lobbed shots. Practice winding up hatchets behind cover or around line of sight to catch survivors off guard. As I said in my other guide, it is very important to place your hatchet in a place where it has a chance to hit survivors. You could have made the best read of your life, but if your hatchet hits a wall or a hitbox before it reaches a survivor, then none of that matters. Your aim needs to be precise. Since a lot of your prediction shots will be lobbed, I highly recommend practicing these as much as you can to master their trajectory. And finally, above all else, trust your gut. In many cases, by the time you've seen a survivor, it's already too late to shoot. A lot of the time, you need to release your hatchet before you can even see them. Trust me, it is way more infuriating to not trust your gut and to watch a survivor run by versus trusting your gut and having it be wrong. If you take one thing away from this video, it's to trust your gut. Having confidence is key. There are many clues given to you in a game that help provide you with the information you need to make solid predictions. This information can be visual, based on audio, or, as I mentioned before, by trusting your instinct. For example, the freshness of scratch marks gives you an idea of how far away the survivor is and how recently they were there. Crows flying off in the distance can alert you that a survivor is actively in that area. Crows landing tell you a survivor was there 15 seconds ago. Here's a list of all survivor actions that have identifiable noises that can be used to help pinpoint their location. Any one of these clues can be used to help provide you with the information you need to hit your shots. A great way to help with prediction shots is to run aura perks. And yes, I know, if you can see their aura, it technically isn't a prediction shot. However, it can help set up more situations you otherwise wouldn't have to land hatchets in, even after their aura disappears. It gives you a good idea of what survivors do in certain situations, like after vaulting a window or finishing a gen. Even if it doesn't become a permanent part of your build, I highly recommend trying perks like I'm All Ears or Bitter Murmur. Information perks are great on Huntress. Let's briefly talk about hitboxes. Having a good understanding of survivor hitboxes and object hitboxes will drastically help with your prediction shots. For example, survivor hitboxes both trail slightly behind them and slightly above them, meaning that with good aim, you can hit survivors that you can't necessarily see. With practice, you can easily hit survivors who are behind short cover or mostly around corners. Even though injured survivors appear slightly shorter, their hitbox is the exact same size as when they're full health. Tall and short survivors, despite being different sizes, also share the same hitbox. Knowing all of this and which objects have notoriously difficult hitboxes, such as hooks and lockers, can drastically improve your odds of landing more shots. Just because you're actively in chase with a survivor doesn't mean you can't predict their movement. You'll notice a lot of common patterns and pathing decisions shared across a lot of the player base. For example, when rotating to new tiles, most survivors will tend to try and place an object between you and them that blocks your line of sight. If the object is something you can throw over, you can generally just arc a hatchet over it to hit survivors who are running away from you in a relatively straight line. If you can tell they're just hiding behind the cover and aren't running, just approach with a hatchet wound up until you're close. When chasing survivors, pay attention to how aware they are of your hatchet. If they don't seem to notice, you can usually wind up your hatchets more often. A lot of prediction hatchets at tiles will come through windows, so it's important to know this to help predict if they'll just hold forward or if they'll try to wait out your shot. If the survivor just holds forward, it's all a matter of timing. If you suspect the survivor will wait out your shot, you can often just hold up your hatchet and maneuver around to where they're waiting to catch them off guard. Picking up on survivor patterns and knowing how different playstyles juke will help you immensely. Finally, let's talk about what I call gamer holes. These are cheeky shots you can land on a survivor to catch them off guard. They're typically shots that involve shooting through a tiny gap that the hatchet can just barely fit through. If a survivor doesn't know they can be hit, they're not gonna dodge. The probability of landing a gamer hole shot depends on a few things: the difficulty of threading the needle, the general knowledge or obviousness of the shot, and how often it comes up in a game. There are tons of shots that many people don't know exist and that aren't really that difficult to hit. Don't overdo these, however, as it's pretty easy to see what you're going for after a try or two at a loop. I recommend messing around in a custom game and trying out various holes to get a good idea of what you can and can't throw through. I'm considering making a video purely dedicated to some of these shots, so drop a comment if you're interested in seeing that. Well, that just about wraps up this video. I know there was a lot of information here to digest, and it may seem overwhelming at first, but just stick at it and keep practicing. Don't get discouraged. Don't worry about winning or losing. Just focus on improving and landing some nice shots. I appreciate all of you making it this far in the video. If you like this tutorial, please consider dropping a like or subscribing if you want to see more videos just like this. You can also catch me streaming live on Twitch at twitch.tv/dadbodshuffle. Take care, everyone.